Hello and welcome. My name is Amanda, and today I wanted to share with you my most disappointing reads of 2019. Today I have a list of 5 books that didn't quite meet my expectations and 1 book I DNF'd. So these are just books that disappointed me, not books that I thought were the worst books that I've read in the year or anything like that. Some of these even received a 3-star rating from me. So it's, like I said, just books that didn't live up to the expectations I had for them in my head. So the first book I have is Foundation by Isaac Asimov, and this is a sci-fi book that was recommended to me by my friend. And I was originally going to buddy read it with him, but it ended up taking me a really long time to read and finish, so we didn't get to buddy read it together. But I gave this a 1-star rating, and for me, the story was just really dense and hard to get into. I mixed up the characters so much, and I really didn't know where the plot was going with this, so I had a hard time keeping up with it, which I think might be a me thing, but either way, it was enough to where I really don't want to continue with this series at all. The second book I have is The Secret History by Donna Tartt, which I gave a 3-star rating, but as I think about it, I could have sworn that I gave it only a 2-star rating. So this book I read after reading, like, quite a while, or not quite a while, but about 6 months to a year after reading The Goldfinch by Donna Tartt, which I think made it to my, like, best books or like most exciting or surprising books of 2018. I love The Goldfinch so much, so I had a lot of expectation for The Secret History to live up to. But the thing I really didn't like about this was I listened to it on audiobook, which I also listened to The Goldfinch, and it was narrated by Donna Tartt herself, which I typically love when authors narrate their books, but the main character we're following in this is a boy, so I didn't feel like the narration really fit him. And also, the characters were just so awful, and I couldn't care about any of them at all. So it made it really hard for me to connect to the story. And I don't think the characters are written in a way for them to be likable particularly. But I need to like at least one character for me to enjoy a story. So for this, going from a Donna Tartt book where I really, really like the main character, and basically just everything about this story, to a story where I didn't like any of the characters. I did like the setting that it was set at. Was it Harvard? It was set at an Ivy League school. But just to not like basically anything else within it was super disappointing for me. It is a literary fiction book, which I know at times can be a little dense, but I actually like literary fiction, or I think I like literary fiction, but this just did not hit the mark for me. The next book I have is another book that was recommended to me, this one by my mother-in-law, and it was The Book of Lost Things by John Connolly. And she described this to me as dark fairy tales, which it is. I ended up giving this a 3-star rating, but again, I swear that I only gave it a 2-star. The main thing I didn't like about this, if I remember correctly, is this is a middle grade story, and I think I learned that I'm not really at a stage in my life where I connect with middle grade a lot. I'm too far away from that age where I don't connect with characters of that age range, and I'm not yet old enough, I feel like, where I find like younger characters really endearing, and like they're really learning a good lesson. So I struggled a lot with the main character of this story, and I feel like even though he was written as a young character, the story he was thrown into was very dark and I guess kind of adult, and it just didn't fit very well. So I was pretty disappointed in this. I haven't unhauled this book yet though, because I feel like maybe if in a couple of years I revisit this again, I might have different feelings. And maybe it'll help if I read it as a physical form versus as an audiobook. But I don't know. I was really looking for just like a good whimsical, like dark fairy tale story. And this was dark, but again, it was with the characters that I just really didn't like this. The next book I read, or I have on this list, is Gullivers Travels by Jonathan Swift. And I gave this a 2-star rating. It was a book that I bought on Audible, and it was an Audible original, so it was like a production. And I feel like the story's really fun, but the plot's very redundant because he basically visits 3 worlds where the same thing happens to him over and over, just in slightly different circumstances. And because it's like a fantasy world and the names of the places are so bizarre, I had a hard time keeping them in my mind, and I got things like muddled and confused, which again could just be a me thing, and maybe if I had read the words versus listening to the words, it would have helped a bit, but it just didn't. And I feel like I remember having a lot of issue with how he described, I think, the state of some of the women. And I think it was like with one woman in particular, her like body features. And I think this was when he was made really small and the people around him were really big. And he just like described her body in such a disgusting way that it was like, I feel like you would notice that whether you're the same size as the woman or whether you're super small. So I don't know if it was just trying to be funny, but it was a little off-putting for me. So I just kind of from that point on like really shut my mind down as I was reading this, and I really just like read it to get through it. I think I read this as another book to get through a readathon. So it was a book that I had made it enough of the way through where I had committed that time to it, where I wasn't going to put it down or DNF it or anything. And I just powered through it, but I did not enjoy it. And then the last book I have is Speaker for the Dead by Orson Scott Card, which I ended up giving a 3-star rating. But I was so disappointed by this. I loved Ender's Game so much. And after reading it, I bought all of the rest of the books in the Ender Saga, intending to continue it, but I didn't get to it in enough time. So I decided to re-listen to Ender's Game this year, and I listened to the rest of the series in audiobook format, and this reigns true for the rest of the books. The events where Ender's Game left off was like such a cliffhanger and really left me wanting to learn more about the state of the universe and where things were going to next. And then we get into Speaker for the Dead, and it's 3,000 years in the future. And we're following new characters in a new world, and it takes a while for the stories to overlap. And it's just not what I was expecting. And I know Orson Scott Card actually wrote this book, intending it to be the first book in the series before he wrote Ender's Game. So I don't know if that had something to do with it, maybe, as that this book was already set up before that, and that was essentially a prequel to this. But I wanted to follow the events of Ender's Game right after it happened, and to be like, I think Ender, instead of being a young teenager, or he's now in his 30s, because while time is passing, he's traveling forward, so time's passing quicker than how he's aging. And it didn't have the same feel to it, so I was just so disappointed in the rest of the series, because I had built it up so much in my mind with how I wanted the story to continue, and then to jump into the next book and not be following the same person really. It didn't live up to what I wanted it to. And the one book I DNF'd is a book that I picked up, not really expecting a lot from it, but really liking a series that I had read by the same author previously, and that's Beauty Queens by Libba Bray. I listened to this book on audiobook, which I had listened to her Gemma Doyle series, I think is what it was called, and I really enjoyed that series. But Beauty Queens was just so bizarre, and I hated the narration of it. I don't know if I would have felt differently had I read this book versus listening to it, but it was so annoying, and I just could not handle the characters, so I DNF'd the book. Maybe like an hour or two into it. I really didn't give it that much of a chance, but I just couldn't deal with it. So these are the 5 books plus an honorary DNF mention that just disappointed me. They're not the worst books I read throughout the year, but definitely books that I had set higher expectations for that really didn't meet them. So I would love to know if you've read any of these books and if you had similar feelings to me, or if not, and why. I would also love to know maybe the 5 books are like the one top book that really disappointed you throughout this year. So if you would let me know down in the comments below, I would love to chat with you there until my next video. Bye!